Hi, good morning, and welcome to the Comics Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club for the month of June. It's June. I can always, that weird thing about this virus is how I lose track of time and what day it is. Our book this month is such a good book. This is such a special book. It's Superman Smashes the Klan by Gene Yang and Gurihiru. And we are very lucky to have both Gene Yang here in California, but from home, and we have Naoko Kawano from Gurihiru. The other member of Gurihiru is sick today, so was not able to make it. So we're all wishing her absolutely the best and that she recovers quickly. But we're very happy to welcome Kawano from Japan, where it's 1 o'clock in the morning over there. So thank you so much for staying up.
遅くまで起きてくださってありがとうございます、川野さんって。
こちらこそよろしくお願いします。
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Absolutely. The first question I usually ask is why comics? Of all of the things that you could be doing creatively, why is it that comics is the thing that you wanted to do? And let's start with Kawano.
まず最初にいつも聞くんですけども、様々な、メディアというか、媒体がある中で、なぜコミックを、漫画を選んだんですかというのが最初に質問で、まず川野さんにお答えいただけますかと。
この仕事を選んだ理由ですよね。
表現としてコミックを選んだ理由とかでもいいですし、はい。
最初、アメリカのコミックスを選択したのは、日本人アーティストを募集していたという偶然の理由なんですけれども、日本では、イラストレーターとしてやっているんですけれども、やっぱり表現の幅のジャンルがやっぱりコミックスの方が大きいっていう部分が一つあると思います。
しますね。はい。So one of the reasons that they chose was that they just accidentally bumped into this sort of like a contest for a Japanese artist to become a comic book artist. So that kind of let them decide to become a comic artist. In Japan they work as an illustrator, but they thought that comics, especially American comics, had a diversity of expressions in many ways. So they thought that was interesting. So that's one of the reasons they chose comics.
That's really interesting. They're one of the very few creative people who are in Japan who are working on American comics. What would she say is the difference from her point of view between American comics and Japanese comics?
もう一問、川野さんに質問なんですけども、日本人で日本からアメリカに向けて、アメコミを作ってらっしゃる方少ないとは思うんですけども、川野さんの、意見というか視点から見て、日本の漫画とアメリカの漫画、アメコミの違いは何だと思いますかって。
アメコミはやっぱりその作業形態がまず違いますよね。大きなところで、日本はほぼ全部が一人でやるのがほとんどなんですけども、アメリカの場合は大きな、最低でも編集と、ライター、ペンシラーですね、インカーとかカラリストとレタラーさんの6人関わるので、いろんな話の幅は広がり、アメコミの方がいろんな視点が入りやすいのかなと思いますが、あんまり私が日本のコミックに詳しくないので、アメコミはとにかくメッセージ性が強い部分が多いと思いますね。
So what she thinks is that basically manga, Japanese comics are made by one author. Of course, there are exceptions, basically. But for American comics, she thinks that the people that works on one title is pretty much divided into a smaller portion of not the work, like there's an editor and then the writer and then penciler, inker, colorist, and a letter, which she thinks is that, of course, gives a lot of wide variety of expressions. And also, with having a lot of people in one title, she thinks that there may be a lot of perspectives that gets into one story that makes it more, like she said earlier, there will be a diversity in stories. Unfortunately, she's not really she's doesn't know about a lot of the manga Japanese comic book industry because she's basically working on the American comic books. But that's what she thinks is that there's a lot of people involved and makes it having a lot of people giving a lot of their way to speak out, and American Comics also has a big message, or there's something that in every title there's something that speaks out to the people who reads it.
That's a very thoughtful answer. Gene, do you have you ever worked on any manga, or only American comics? Oh, we have no volume from you.
Sorry, I had muted my mic so I wouldn't interfere with the with your conversation with Kwano. But the closest I've gotten to manga is working with Gurihiru on the Avatar comics, and then now Superman Smashes the Klan. So no, I've never done anything for the Japanese market.
Yeah. Do you from your outsider point of view, as a person who studies comics, what do you think is the difference between, or a significant difference between?
I mean, traditionally, I think the Japanese market has had way more genre diversity than we have. When I was growing up in the 80s, it was mostly superhero comics with maybe a little bit of Funny Animal, and Archie was there. And it was only recently that we've seen much more genre diversity. Diversity of every kind, really, but especially genre diversity, manga has always been way ahead of us. And I really do think like the manga craze that American comics went through like maybe 10 or 15 years ago has really affected us in a wonderful way. I think a lot of the comics that we are seeing now on the market today would not exist had manga not become really popular in the early 2000s.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree with that. Because those kids who were reading manga then have now grown up to be the comic makers of today. So it can't help but influence them and influence their taste. No, I very much agree with that. You've been working, as you noted, with Gurihiru for many years. I feel like it's been 15 years or so since that first Avatar.
Yeah, maybe something like that. Yeah.
Why do you like working?
Oh, with them? That's exactly what I was gonna say. I think Sasaki and Kwano are among the most elite cartoonists working in the world of comics. I mean, I just think their work is absolutely stellar. And when I began talking with DC Comics about doing Superman Smashes the Klan, they were at the very top of the list. I said, this would be my dream team. I did not think we would be able to get them because I know they're in really high demand. But I'm so glad. So thank you, Kwano. Thank you so much for saying yes.
河野さん、今ですね、ちょっと、ジンさんに聞いた質問が、なんで、河野さんにもジンさんにも同じ質問をしてて、で、ジンさんは、日本の漫画はとにかくジャンルが多いというのと、でもアメコミにもいろいろ提供を与えていると。で、そのことによって、今の、若いアメコミ作家さんも日本の漫画の影響を受けたことによって、いろいろと、業界がいろいろとさらに推し進められたんじゃないかっておっしゃってて、さらにブライアンさんから、もうグリヒルさんと今年15年ぐらい経ちますかねってことをおっしゃってて、で、なんでそのグリヒルさんなんですかみたいなこと言ったんですけど、もともとグリヒルさん、佐々木さんと川野さんっていうのは業界の中でも多分トップのカートゥニストのうちの一組じゃないかって彼もおっしゃってて、で、もともとのスーパーマンの企画が上がった時も、まずはグリヒルさんが 一番上に候補として上がったとおっしゃってたんで、なんで今回のこのスーパーマンの漫画も受けてくださってありがとうございますってジンさんからお礼をおっしゃってました。
こちらこそありがとうございます。ヤンさ
Thank
ん
you
の
for choosing us.
脚本とか好きなので、大好き
We
なので。
really love your writing, your script.
Oh, thank you. It was an easy choice. It was an easy choice. We knew early on that we wanted this combination of those old Fleischer Superman cartoons and manga, and I just thought Sasaki and Kwano would be the perfect artists to do that. Can I ask Kwano a question? Is that okay?
ハノさんに質問していいですかってジンさんが。Yes.
Yeah. So what did you think about like what were the differences for you between working on Avatar and then working on Superman Smashes the Klan? Did it feel very different?
そうですね。さっきも言ったように、ジンさんはやはりこのスーパーマンに関してはフライシャーのテイストと漫画のテイストを合わせた絵柄でやりたいとずっと思ってたんで、グリヒューさんとやれて嬉しかったっていうのと、ずっとやりたかったと思ってたのと、あとは、今回の件にジンさんからの質問で、そのアバターをやってるのと、スーパーマンやってて、なんか違いとかありましたかとか、どういうふうに違ってると思いましたかって。
アバターと、あるんですけれども、他の、マーベルとかのコミックスともすごい違うのが、私たち子供向けレーベルが多くて、子供とか、若い人とかを書くことが多かったんですけど、今回はちょっとスーパーマンというちょっと大柄な人間というか人物を書くというのがまず大きな違いでした。
So, one of the things that they thought were different is that basically they draw for Marvel and with Avatar is they draw a lot of kids or young people, young adults, but you know it was a quite different experience for them to draw Superman because he's a mature or an adult, and also he's a big guy, a big guy. So that was quite a different experience for them.
Yeah, it's how do I put the question? A Superman obviously is a very American character. He's represents America in many ways. Is it hard for them to approach, or is it easy for them to approach drawing Superman given the cultural differences?
Can Kwan start?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay, カンさん、ブライアンさんからの質問で、スーパーマンっていうのはとてもアメリカを代表するようなアメリカ的なキャラクターだと思うんですけども、それを書くのは難しかったです。それとも簡単でしたが、何か違いとか、文化的な違いとか感じたことありましたかという質問です。
文化的な違いはあんまり感じたことないんですよね。スーパーマンっていうと、やっぱりこっちでよく昔、ブルース・ティムさんの書いたアニメーションのスーパーマンのイメージがすごく強くて、今回もその影響がすごく出てると思うんですけども、そんなにいつも文化的な違い、ちょっと今回は歴史的なものが多かったので、それのちょっと資料を探すのすごい大変だったんですけども、いつもとはそんなに違わないと思いますね。
So she didn't have a lot of cultural differences, feel cultural differences in drawing because they were familiar with Bruce Timm's Superman. They used to watch a lot of the cartoons from the Warner Brothers shows. So, but not the cultural differences, but historical ways. They really had a hard time searching for references. So and to make it accurate. So that was actually the hard part to draw, was to make it accurately historical.
Sure, because of the 1940s
Yes.
time period. Yeah. In addition to that, because Kwano is as I understand, she mostly is doing coloring and things like that, not the line art. Unless I have that wrong, please feel free to correct me.
You're right.
Yeah. So, was it difficult to approach drawing or coloring things from the 1940s, considering that there's very little color illustrations and things that exist.
カラーリストのお仕事の面での質問なんですけど、先ほどおっしゃったようにその資料が少なかったということは、色を塗ったりするのも資料が、フルカラーの資料が現存してないので、あまり大変でしたかというブライアンさんの質問です。
そうですね。カラーについては非常に大変でしたね。資料がもう、いただく資料がすべてモノクロ、白と黒ばかりなので、その辺はちょっとこう、その昔を表現している、とか、あとそれこそフライシャーのアニメーションを見たりとかして、多分こういう感じなんじゃないかなっていうカラーリング、まああまり派手じゃない戦後のカラーリングをちょっと意識しました。
Yes, yeah, there was you had the point that it was really very difficult to color because all the references that they had were black and white, so they had to look through like old movies that was based on the 1940s, or they also watched a lot of the Fleischer cartoons, Superman cartoons, and also they tried not to make the color too flashy or like too dashy, you know, because it's more like a dim, even if it was colored, it was a little bit of a dim color tone back in the day. So they try to make it a little bit more, what do you call it? Not black and white, but something close to not too colorful.
Like muted.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I was going to say sepia toned,
Yeah,
but
muted.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, sepia, I think that's the right word.
I mean,
yeah.
I thought you did a
Brian,
great job.
yeah.
I thought you did an amazing job.
素晴らしいカラーリン
And
グし
I
ました、
especially appreciated the way you differentiated between the flashback scenes and the regular scenes. You know, I thought you did such a wonderful
回
job.
想と普通のシーンの色の違いの変え方もすごく良かったと思うので、とても素晴らしいカラーをありがとうございますと。Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely.
I also want to confess that one of the things I was most excited about was seeing Sasaki and Kwano do Cars from the 1940s. Look at those cars. They're amazing, right?
あと40年代の車を描いていただいたのもすごく楽しかったです。嬉しかったですって。
何ですか？
車です。40年代の車、古い車を描いてもらえたのもすごい。
古い車もなんか白黒ばっかりなので、どんな色にしたらいいのかすごい悩みました。
Yeah, they could hardly find any colored references, so they had a hard time thinking about what the color would be for the cars.
どんな色があるのかって本当に想像して。
Yeah, でも素晴らしいです。But they couldn't, figure out what the color would be like in the cars from the 40s.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for all that hard work.
でも素晴らしい、大変一生懸命に仕事してくださってありがとうございますってジンさんからです。
That's fantastic. What did I want to ask here? Let's just ask a quick question about her physical working process. Does she, assuming that she works digitally and not any other way, because it looks it. Can she talk just very quickly about how she approaches a page overall, and what her workflow is like to get to go from black and white artwork to a colored page?
簡単にで良いので、作業の工程を教えていただけますかと、一色のページからカラーに至るまでの、あとどういった、ソフトとかパソコン使ってらっしゃるかみたいなの。
作業工程ですか？
はい。
まず、こちらの、ヤンさんから脚本をいただいてから、佐々木の方が、レイアウトをまず書きます。で、それをまず編集さんに見せて、そこで編集をもらうんですけども、その後、ペンシル作業に入るんですけれども、そこでちょっと私もいろいろちょっとこうした方がいいんじゃないかなっていう、チェックを入れて、そこでお互いちょっと意見を交わすんですけれども、それを また編集に見せて、で、その後もうすぐにインクとカラーは同時進行でやります。
ペンシルは今デジタルですか？フルで。
はい、ペンシルは今もうすべてこれ作業は、デジタル作業で、ペンシルはクリップスタジオ、アメリカでなんていうソフトなのかちょっと忘れたんですけども、ペンシルインクはクリップスタジオというソフトを使っていて、カラーは全部フォトショップでやっています。
So, just a quick explanation of the work is that after Gene sends out the script, Sasaki, the penciler inker, will work on the layout, and after the layout is finished, they'll send it over to the editor for approval. So when it comes back, they'll start penciling. But when they start penciling, also Kawano will also give some advices and inputs to some of the pages and the lines. And then after the pencil is approved by the editor, they basically work on the inks and the color at the same time. So, and as you have stated, they work fully digitally. And for pencils and ink, they use a software called Clip Studio. I don't know what that's called in the States, but in Japan it's called Clip Studio. And for coloring, they use Photoshop.
Very good. Very good. Let me also ask a question, and I'm perhaps you're the one to ask this, Aki.
Yes.
When the scripts come from Gene,
Mhm.
are you the one translating them, or is someone else translating them?
I translate.
You translate them.
Yes, 72
So,
pages.
Are there difficulties in translating some of the idioms or some of the culturally specific words or thoughts between the two, or do you find that a relatively easy process?
Gene's script is very how should I say, described very specifically. So it's very easy may not be the word, but it's very understandable for me. So I don't really have to look up to a lot. And there's a lot of references too that he links into the script. So every time I also did all the Avatar books that he did, but it's really comfortable for me to translate his script into Japanese. And even if I have some issues, I sometimes ask questions, but that doesn't happen a lot. But it's really comfortable and easy to understand for horrible English speaking Japanese like me to translate. So I really appreciate your wonderful script. I love reading your script every time, and I'm always looking forward to reading the next issue every time I work on it. So, but it's very long, so it takes a lot of time.
Well, thank you, and I don't know if it's fair to describe your English as horrible. I think
you're fine.
Your English, I'm Chinese, and your English is way better than my Chinese, guaranteed.
Thank you, but カンさんに一応翻訳の過程だけ私の方に質問があったんで、それを答えさせていただきました。
Very good. Well, I don't want to keep you guys too much later because I know it's like 1:30 in the morning there. I really want to thank Kawano for this beautiful piece of work. Between the two of them, this is one of my favorite comics this year. Not just comics for kids, but one of my favorite comics this year because it's just so nice to look at. It's very beautiful, and it tells such an important story. So thank you so much for being willing to participate in this and for doing such a great book.
もうだいぶ遅くなってきたんで、あまり長引かせてもあれなんです。最後にブライアンさんの方から改めてこの素晴らしい本を提供してくださってありがとうというのと、あと物語的にも大変重要な作品ですし、かつブライアンさんにとっても今年多分トップに入るぐらいに重要な本になると思います。個人的にも好きですし、ただ子供向けとかそういうのも取っ払って、アメコミとしてもすごく好きな作品だったので、このような作品を提供してくださってありがとうございますとのことです。
はい。ありがとうございました。こちらこそ。
Thank you from us too.
Thank you. Again, thank the two of you both for taking the time for coming in from Japan. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. ありがとうございます。
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys later sometime.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yes, hopefully we can
Have a great night.
Store.
Yeah, or good sleep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Take care.
All right. Have a good night.
All right.
Bye. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. All right. So you and me, Gene. This will go a little faster now that we don't have to wait for translation in between every step. You've been on the show once a couple years ago, but let's go back to that why comics question for you. What is it for you? Because you're not just a comics author, but you're also I think a teacher, and you are a teacher, but I think that you also understand the power of comics to teach and do things like that. So speak about why comics.
Sure. Well, first I want to thank you, Brian, for putting that together, because I've only hung out with Gurihiru maybe twice. We did a couple of signings together at Comic-Con for the Avatar books. It's awesome. It's awesome to get to hang out with them, even virtually. So that was really special. Really appreciate it. But for comics, for me, it was awesome, dude. It was awesome. Thank you I can't even believe you were able to do that.
Oh, all you got to do is ask sometimes, That's all it takes.
Yeah.
Ask the question.
Yeah, and I guess the power of technology too is pretty amazing. But for comics, I began collecting comics when I was in the 5th grade, and I just loved them immediately. I don't even know if I could have articulated a reason why I loved them so much when I was a kid. I think there was something about being able to tell stories through drawings, or being able to take in stories through drawings. And I'd always been interested in drawing. When I was really young, I wanted to be an animator. But I think comics, there's something about comics that feels way more accessible than even animation, especially in the 80s. Like if I wanted to make an animation in the 80s as like a 5th grader, it would have been nearly impossible to do. But comics, anybody could make comics. And as soon as I got the very first issue off of the spinner rack at my local bookstore, I kind of intuitively understood that. So within weeks, I began making comics. I had this best friend named Jeremy. We would sit at the lunch tables. We'd write and draw together. Then we'd get his mom to photocopy them for us at our workplace, and we'd staple them by hand and we'd sell them. So that was the beginning of my comic book career in 5th grade.
Yeah, that's great. Comics really speak universally, I think, to people, but we're going through a period now where kids comics, especially, are the greatest growth in the market, right? And this is. You and I both know that this is historically very strange in American comics, because we kind of chase all the kids away. What would you ascribe this sea change to?
I think it's awesome to see. When I was in the 5th grade reading comics, I think there were maybe only a handful of kids. We had a class of 30 kids. Maybe only 4 or 5 of us read comics, but now I'm lucky enough to do these school visits where I talk about comic books and graphic novels and all that kind of stuff. Pretty much every kid in the class reads comics. They might not all read the same comic. Actually, that's not true. They all read Raina Telgemeier's comics, but they read other stuff as well. And it's amazing. It's amazing to see. Kids are reading more comic books than ever. They're just not reading the same comics that I read when I was a kid. I think some of that is this is it feels crazy in retrospect, but I remember being a comic book reader in the 80s, and then starting to make comics professionally in the 90s, and there was this discussion about whether or not comics were only for boys. It seems ridiculous now. It seems absolutely ridiculous now. But I think there was some of that. There was even among educators back then, there's this feeling that, oh, you know, comic books only appeal to this half of the class, you know. So I think some of it was just bad thinking. It was like sexist ideas that was keeping comics from growing. The other thing is the limited genres. You know, like the fact that there were only superhero comics definitely you know, kept comics from really exploding. So once we had the manga, the popularity of manga, the rise of manga in the early 2000s, I honestly think that I don't, you remember this, right? Like in the early 2000s, like the Twilight movies hit, and then suddenly all these people started coming to comic book conventions that didn't normally come.
Sure.
I think that was really, I know there was like some ridiculous pushback to that as well, but I think that really helped the medium. And I also think that the fact that there are these like groundbreaking cartoonists, I think Reina's one of them. I think Kazu Kibuishi is one of them. I think Craig Thompson is one of them, that really pushed the depth of stories that could be told through comics to a younger audience. I think that was super important.
Sure. Well, I mean, and you're not going to toot your own horn, but I'll do it. I'll put you in the same group with American-born Chinese. I think that book was a really transformative book for a lot of people to show both the power of storytelling to put you in somebody else's shoes, and just breaking the racial hegemony, you know the word I'm talking about, of comics. You know, I can't even think of another comic except for something like Master of Kung Fu that had an Asian protagonist before then. You know, and so
representation in general was kind of rough back then, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. So that was a very important book. Let's pivot to Superman Smashes the Klan, because it's a book that's very important, I think, for this moment in time, and yet it's based on a 1940s radio serial, at least in part. It's an interesting place for this book to come from. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I do think a part of me feels sad that it feels so relevant. You know, I first heard about that radio show that you mentioned from a book called Freakonomics. It's this New York Times bestseller nonfiction book where an economist and a reporter take a look at all these different aspects of human life through the lens of economics, and they come up with all these, like, really, at the time they felt like really new and unusual insights, and they spent a whole chapter on this. They spent a whole chapter on the Klan and the Fiery Cross storyline from the 1940s Superman radio show. The reason why they talk about it is because this radio show, this storyline, had a real world effect. In that storyline, Superman defends a Chinese American family against a group of hooded racists, and supposedly after that radio show aired, the real life Ku Klux Klan saw this huge drop in membership, because once they were portrayed as these bumbling bigots on a children's radio show, nobody could take them seriously anymore. Nobody wanted to join, and that is pointed to as this this real PR fall for the Klan. Before that, in some areas, in some communities in America, the Klan was still seen as a community organization and not a terrorist organization. And after that, supposedly they never recovered. So for a geek, that's a big deal. You know, like when I was a kid, my parents used to criticize me for reading superhero comics because they're like, these people wear spandex and tights and they dress in these colorful colors. Nobody actually does that in real life. This has no connection to the real world. So why are you even wasting your time on this? And here was a story dating back to the 1940s that shows that, you know, these stories about people in tights, about people in capes can actually have a real world effect. That the geek culture is not just about escapism. Geek culture can also have this profound effect on our actual daily lives. So that's what drew me into it. That was one of the big things. The other thing is that there is this Chinese American family at the center of all the action. I've been reading superhero comics since the 5th grade. They're just, as we talked about earlier, there are not that many characters who look like me in the comics that I read as a kid. So to find out that there was this family that was a lot like mine in this old Superman story, you know, dating back to almost his beginning, was amazing. I just, there's something really affirming about that, right? About finding somebody who means old story. So for all those reasons, I was really excited to do this project.
Yeah. And so you didn't hear the radio show until into your 30s then?
Yes, I did not hear the radio show until after I read that book. Yeah, after I read that book, I found it on YouTube. I also found there's this other book called Superman versus the Kkk Guy by a guy named Rick Bowers. It's like a middle grade YA nonfiction book. So I read that with my son when he was like in 4th or 5th grade, and we talked about it. But yeah, I didn't know about it when I was a kid.
Yeah, it's good because I'm of the geek class that I was so desperate for anything with superheroes. I had actually heard it when I was probably 14 or 15.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait, how did you find it before the internet?
I mean, I read about it in, I think, a letters column of a Superman comic. I think. I can't imagine how else I would have heard about it. Or you know what? I may have actually. It might have been one of those early times when I was a kid that I actually got into Manhattan. We went to a comic book store and maybe they had like, one of those cassette box sets of it or something like that,
Oh, okay.
Possibly.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember the details about that part, but yeah, I did track it down because there was so little. I mean, that my memory of comics when I was a kid is you really had to track things down because they just didn't exist otherwise.
Yes.
In other media, unlike today,
Yeah.
And I think that
unlike today,
today you just turn on the television, you have hundreds of hours of superheroes coming at you. It's kind of a thing. How did you approach adapting the story from one medium to another? Did you start to approach it literally, or did you know what I mean? Like just listening to it and transcribing, or did you try to build the story just from the common root?
Yeah, I began by listening to that radio show over and over. So like I said, I found it on YouTube, and then for a while, whenever I was in the car, I would listen to it. And that's when I realized that this story, I mean, this is a decades old story, but it still actually has, and parts of it obviously didn't age well, but I do think the core of it still works, because I would listen with my kids in the car and I was expecting them to tell me to turn it off or to not be interested at all. And they would actually actively ask me to play the next episode.
Oh,
so
cool.
when that happened, I realized there's something about the way that original story was structured that still works, So I listened to it over and over again, and then eventually, in a document, I just wrote a short summary of every single episode, so I could get a real sense of what that, what the overall like plot structure was like, and then from there, I would write the outlines of the books. So originally, Superman Smashes the Klan was published as 3 separate volumes. So I wrote the outlines for each of the 3 volumes. Those went through multiple iterations with Marie Javins, who is the editor of the book. Marie and Diego Lopez and Paul Kaminsky also helped. They're all editors at DC. And that's really how the whole thing formed. So we really tried to keep the overall structure of that original story, especially the parts where my kids were really into it, I tried to keep those parts. And then we also tried to keep all of the main characters. I think we did. All those main characters are in there. The big difference is that we made the daughter of the Chinese American family, who doesn't even have a name in the original show. We made her one of the point of view characters.
Yeah. How did the book? Did you pitch the book to DC? I'm assuming because you read about it in Freakonomics and then you pitched this.
Yeah, DC is starting this. I mean, they've started this line of graphic novels for young readers. I personally think it is one of the most exciting things that's happening in American comics right now. I would say that even if I wasn't part of the line, but they're starting up this line. And then I had a conversation with Marie and with Bob Harris at a comic book convention. We had a breakfast one morning, and I mentioned this radio show. So they asked me to put in a pitch, and I did. And luckily they said yes. You know, lucky for me, they said yes. And they also immediately contacted Gurihiru. So that was actually in the pitch. In the pitch, I wrote, these are my ideal artists. I totally get if we can't get them, but if we can't get them, I'd love to have somebody in that ballpark, you know, that's drawing within that same sort of style.
Yeah, when you first worked with them on the Avatar books, I assume that was an editor putting the two of you together, that you hadn't had any connection.
Yes.
Prior to that, yeah.
No, we had no connection. And then I'd get these pages from them in my email box, and I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing!" You know, and they're my kids' favorite favorite artists. You know, they're my kids' favorite comic book creators. So we have 4 kids. I have a son and 3 daughters, and all 3 of my daughters say that they're the best. So my son, his favorite cartoonist is Jason Shiga, but for my daughters, it's Gurihiru and then Raina Telgemeier.
Yeah.
They're really big and popular.
It's Raina for almost everybody. Yeah, it's funny how that works.
Yeah,
Do we have any questions, Jordan? Okay. We're gonna pull up a question. And it's Lisa Bishop, who's a teacher, who's really fantastic. She hasn't read the book yet. What do you want youth to get out of it? The words Klan and Superman are really intriguing, and I'm curious about what you hope that youth learn from this creation.
Well, thank you, Lisa. Thank you for being a teacher and a librarian. Those are 2 of the most important jobs in the entire world. I would say this is the I think this was the lesson that I felt like I learned from doing the book, and that is that the future requires us to be able to get along and work with and be community with, and sometimes even be family with people who are different from us. You know, in a lot of ways, I worry that we are losing our faith in a multicultural America. It's not even just America. I actually kind of see this all over the world, right? I think the entire world, we all learned this really important lesson after World War II about what happens if we follow our most base instincts, you know? When it comes to people who are different from us, and I kind of feel like we're losing that lesson, like we're forgetting that lesson, you know. So in America, it's things that even 20 years ago, 15 years ago, you would never say in public. People are now saying in public, and I think that's kind of crazy. Like people in really high positions are saying in public, and I think that's kind of crazy. And if you look at you know, some of what's happening in Europe and even like the Philippines and in India, even in Japan, you're seeing these same sorts of ideas pop up again and again. And it's all rooted in this idea, can we live with people who are different from us? You know, I think the only way, the only path forward is to say yes to that question, right? We're not going to roll back communication technology. We're not going to roll back transportation technology. We have to get along with people who are different from us. That's the only way to build a tomorrow. So that's really what I hope that comes through in the book.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And even for me at least, as a reader, to recognize that this story is a story from the 40s, and that the idea of the Klan has been discredited before, right? And
Yeah.
these ideas of racial supremacy and white supremacy specifically are not just wrong-headed and un-American, but they've always been that way. And somehow we forgot that, which seems really weird to me. I don't know why we forgot that, other than people trying to use fear to divide us.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's hard. I think I was a high school teacher for a really long time, and when you went to the cafeteria, you see kids sitting with other kids who look like them for the most part, and then some of that kind of I could see why that would make some people question whether or not we ought to be like whether or not this is working or not. This idea of multiculturalism is working or not. But first, I do think that a superficial glance at a school cafeteria does not tell the whole story, right? There are connections between those tables that aren't necessarily apparent unless you get to know a community. And second is, in that school where I taught, there were areas where people where it was always multicultural. So the two biggest areas, number one was sports. On sports teams, it seemed like kids of different backgrounds would treat each other almost as siblings if they were on the same sports team. Second is the geek culture clubs. Like the anime club was always super diverse, and those kids were super close, So there are ways in which we have to move forward with each other, right? And I do think like geek culture has a role to play in that.
Oh, I very much agree, and I think you're absolutely right that being a geek was the one thing that bound a lot of kids together, regardless of race or class or creed or any of that. Since you brought up sports, I'll just super quickly plug your other book too, which is fantastic, Dragon Hoops, that you wrote and drew yourself. This is a great book, and members of the kids club who enjoyed Superman Smashes the Klan, you'll almost certainly enjoy Dragon Hoops as well. It's written a little bit older maybe, but I think it'll be absolutely fine for any kid to read. It's about basketball and how sports brings people together, and from someone who wasn't into sports prior to this too.
No, I hated sports when I was a kid. But thank you for the plug. I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, you always want to plug stuff that's good. So we almost, there was a minute where we were going to choose this as the kids' pick, but then I just thought that this was a much more important book for the minute and the moment that we're in. And also, we hadn't done a Superman story in ever. I think this is the first superhero comic we've done for the kids' club. Yeah, for the kids' club. Yeah. First one we've ever done for the kids club.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for doing that. I think it is, like I said before, I think it is kind of sad that the themes are relevant now. I was not, part of the reason why I proposed it to DC is because Charlottesville had happened, and I was kind of shocked. Maybe I shouldn't have been. Maybe it was naive for me to be shocked, but I was shocked. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff, right? Like a shooting at an African American church, and it was just things that I felt like, when I was a kid in the 80s, I would read about these things happening in the 1960s during the civil rights movement. I felt like we're happening again. And it was like 2014, 15, 16, 17. It felt so crazy. And that some of that went into this book, and I think I just think, it's disheartening. It's disheartening that those themes are still so relevant. But at the same time, I do think there are hopeful. There are signposts for hope. I kind of think that the fact that DC let a Chinese American writer team up with a Japanese art team to tell this story that's rooted in the 1940s, that kind of like there's something to that, right? Like when the original storyline aired, many Japanese American families were still in the internment camps, and there was still really intense anti-Japanese feeling in America, right? And that was a sin that we had to deal with as a nation. So so the fact that I got to team up with Gurihiru to tell the story, I do feel like is at least a small sign of some sort of progress.
Yeah, no, and I also I think it really shows just how important art is to transforming culture, right? I mean, I have to think that some kids are going to read this book, and these lessons are going to live with them for the rest of their lives, you know, and that's the power of storytelling and stories. So yeah, this is great stuff. We have another question, Jordan. What about one of these ones from Rodrigo? What are the particular challenges, opportunities associated with adapting a script? And how much flexibility did you allow yourself to deviate from the story? Those two questions.
Yeah. So first is we did want to keep the like the bones of the original story. You know, we wanted to keep the main characters. We wanted to be recognizable as an adaptation of that original story. I guess one of the challenges and opportunities that came up was at the center of the story was a Chinese American family. You know, and that was intriguing, but I was also kind of confused by it because. I just don't think, like, when you think about the Klan, I don't think Asian Americans are the first group that you think of as their enemies, right? So I wanted to figure out why. I wanted to figure out why there was a Chinese American family at the center of the story in 1946. And I knew nothing about the history of the Klan and its relationship with Asian Americans. So I did a bunch of research, and what I discovered was really interesting. You know, so the African Americans are obviously the Klan's first and primary targets. You know, the Klan was formed immediately after the Civil War because they were just freaked out that African Americans would demand, you know, equal rights and equal treatment and to be like seen as human beings. That's what they were freaked out about. Yep. But pretty soon after that, and this is something I didn't know because I never learned this in my history class, within 3 years, a West Coast Klan was founded. And back then, there just weren't a lot of African Americans on the West Coast. So the Klan on the West Coast, their primary targets were Chinese immigrants, and they took the costume and all the methods, all the terrorist methods from the Klan of the South, and they just applied it to these Chinese immigrant populations. You know, so I think Chinese Americans, Asian Americans in general, we have historically not been politically active, and I think that is a mistake. I think when you look at the history, what happens is anti-Black racism often inspires and informs anti-Asian racism. So for Asians to sit on the sidelines during Black Lives Matter, it's disrespectful of our own history. I don't think I would have known that had I not done this book. The other thing is, I think the reason why Chinese Americans, there's a Chinese American family at the center of the story, is because Chinese Americans were allowed to move into white suburbs after World War II in 1946. Like, this was actually happening, you know? And African Americans, Japanese Americans, Mexican Americans were not afforded the same opportunity. By and large, they were not afforded the same opportunity. Chinese Americans were kind of singled out among all people of color. The reason is not a good one. It's because during World War II, China was America's greatest ally against the Empire of Japan. And because of that, Chinese Americans had this profound shift in the story that was told about us in America. So before World War II, we were seen as criminals. You would go to Chinatown to buy drugs. You know, you would go to Chinatown to get mugged. And then immediately after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Chinese Americans had like a PR shift. Like we went from being these criminals to being loyal and brave and hardworking Americans. And this was not through anything that we had done. You know, Chinese Americans worked just as hard before World War II as after World War II. But because of this, we were allowed to move into these white suburbs after the war was over. That didn't happen for African Americans. So I cover all of this in the backstory. I just think that, like, one of the things that I felt like I really learned from doing this project was, you know, Chinese Americans, Asian Americans in general, we're often seen as like the model minority. And what people mean by that is we're a model that even people of color can make it in America through hard work. But if you look at the history behind the Klan of the Fiery Cross, storyline, if you look at the history of World War II and what happened to Asian Americans during World War II, that's just not the case. You know, Chinese Americans worked really hard before World War II and they couldn't get out of Chinatown. What it took was this PR shift. What it took was a shift in story. And that same shift in story did not happen for African Americans, right? So a lot of what we see today, I think the Asian American experience can really shed light on if it's properly understood. So a lot of that stuff that I just talked about, I cover in the backstory, in the back matter of this book. And I hope that gets out to kids and to educators.
Yeah. Do we know anything about the people who wrote the original radio play?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know a ton. They do cover it a little bit in that Freakonomics book. They also talk about it, like Rick Bowers talks about it in his book Superman versus the Kkk, which I would encourage everybody to read. Anybody who's interested in pop culture to read. But I do know that Bob Maxwell at the time was the head of Superman Inc., which was DC's arm to deal with all of the Superman licensing opportunities. So he was really hands-on with that radio show. And I do think he had a hand in that. So he was, from what's described in what I've read, he was a Jewish American who is not a particularly observant Jew, but because of what happened during World War II, he felt an obligation to fight bigotry in a meaningful way. So I think he was one of the key proponents of that storyline. There's also this story about Stetson Kennedy, who is he's a reporter and an activist from that time. And in the first accounts that I read, it talked about how he had this really huge hand in the formation of that storyline as well. But when I dug into it, it seemed a little sketchier, which is why I don't really talk about it that much in the book.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I was just wondering. Looks like we have another question, also from Lisa again. Are you planning on creating more stories with characters who are dealing with racism or characters who are learning about becoming anti-racist?
Yeah, so the first book that I did with my primary publisher with First Second Books is called American Born Chinese, and in that book I do talk about racism and all those sorts of issues from a Chinese American perspective. And then in the book that Brian so graciously plugged, Dragon Hoops, this is a nonfiction book about a high school basketball team out of Oakland, California. It's a fairly diverse team. Most of the players are African Americans. They are from every area in the Oakland Bay Area. Some of them are from the hills, some of them are from the flatlands, and then a few other players on the team. There's a Sikh player. He was almost always the only Sikh on the court. There was a Chinese exchange student, and there was one Caucasian player. So I think within the team dynamics, some of that stuff does come up. The coach of that team was the first African-American head coach of that school. And he is also an alum of the school. When he went to that school, it was a predominantly rich white school. So he had that experience of being a minority within that situation as a kid really informs the way he coaches, right? So I think he just coached in a very welcoming and anti-racist way. So I hope I was able to capture some of that in the book. And even though the book is about sports does inform the real world, and the real world does inform sports, right? So one of the games that's detailed in the book was played immediately after the Ferguson decision was announced. So I think that even though wanted to just focus on basketball that day, I think the Ferguson decision absolutely affected what happened on the court.
Yeah, no, and I'll even say I think that the decisions that the NFL are making now going forward, and NASCAR and all of the other sports leagues, those are going to have profound impacts down the line. Maybe not in like the next 3 months, but like 2 years from now, 3 years from now, I just think it's just going to make a difference in people's lives when these large organizations and institutions say, no, we are with the people on this.
Yeah. And to be honest, I think the NBA has always been a little bit ahead on this. Maybe not even a little bit. It's always been ahead, right? Compared to the NFL and the other sports leagues. I don't think that's an accident. I really don't think that's an accident, because of, like, this is something I didn't know before doing that book, but it's because of the origins of that sport. You know, basketball was created in the late 1800s, and early on it was seen as like this outsider sport. If you were a community, like if you were a community of color or an immigrant community, some sort of marginalized community that did not have the resources to maintain a field of grass, you would play basketball. So from the very beginning, basketball was a sport for outsiders, right? So I think that ethos has carried through to today, and that's why I think the NBA was more sensitive to this stuff early on.
Yeah, no, I agree. Just because I don't want it to pass, Jordan, can we put up the one right above that from Teresa Lai? Thank you. She's also a teacher, and she was asking in another question. She was asking if the three parts are the same as this. Yes, they're the same. But she says, "Thank you for writing about this topic, because at my school, the #1 genre that gets checked out more than any other are the graphic novels." And I hear this from teachers and librarians all of the time, that this, in so many ways, this is the new lingua franca that just universally kids are understanding and reading and appreciating. You've made some very conscious choices to work in kids comics. Is that because you see this as a teacher, or that you just had good instincts and you knew what was going on?
I don't know if it was instincts at all. I began in comics making mini comics, which are handmade comics. It's essentially what Jeremy and I were doing when I was in the 5th grade, right? So when I was in my 20s, that's what I would do. I would make a comic. I'd take it to my local Kinko's, remember those? And I would Xerox them, and then I would staple them and sell them at shows or through local stores. So when you're working at that level, you're not thinking about demographics. You're not thinking, oh, this is a kid's comic or this is an adult comic. You're thinking, who are the 16 people I can convince to buy this comic? You know, I didn't get categorized as like a kid's comic creator until after I signed on with First Second Books. So First Second is part of Macmillan, which is this giant publisher. And I didn't realize this before I signed on with them, but in the book world, demographics are a really big deal. So they categorize me as like a white author and a kid's author. I think that's a great place for me. I'm really happy that they categorize me like that, right? It feels right. But I also feel lucky that I got to be a part of this huge wave of kids comics. And now the reason why I'm so excited about the DC Young Readers line is because I feel like this is the bridge. This is the bridge between the comics that I read as a kid and the comics that the kids are reading now, right? Right. This will be a way to introduce like the tradition of superhero comics and superhero universes to a brand new generation.
Sure, it's just so funny that it's backwards from what it was when we were a kid, right?
Yeah,
these were the comics
so backwards. Yeah,
and now we're having to introduce them to children. It's the funniest thing.
Yeah.
It is an amazing circle. I don't know. So maybe for a second, can you talk about what Superman means to you and means to our culture?
Yeah, I was not a Superman fan when I was in the 5th grade. You know, the very first comic of my collection was a Superman comic, and that's because that was the one that my mom made me buy. The comic that I actually wanted was a Marvel 2-in-1 starring the Thing and Rom the Space Knight, because I thought those two characters looked so much cooler than Superman. But my mom forced me to buy the Superman book because he's the safest superhero, right? He's the one with the most, I don't know, like he's just the best behaved one. But I brought it home and I read it, and I fell in love with the medium. I don't think I fell in love with Superman though. I still thought he was a dork.
Yeah. You're making us all crack up here. I got to tell you, Gene.
But,
oh nope, you're muted.
Oh,
Gene,
am I muted? Can you hear me now?
You're good now. Now you're good.
Okay, I'm good. Okay, so am I not good again?
Good.
They know I'm insulting Superman, so they're getting mad. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. So Superman was like he just seemed like a dork. He seemed like a dork. He seemed like he always did the right thing, you know, and there was no edge to him. And as a kid, I was way more interested in other superheroes, particularly Marvel heroes like Spider-Man, you know, the Fantastic Four, Ghost Rider. They all seemed like they were so much edgier than Superman. I didn't really become a Superman fan until I realized he was dorky in the same way my parents are dorky. My parents are immigrants. They've always been rule followers. And at some point, I thought, man, my parents are rule followers because they're immigrants. They are freaked out that people are going to question their citizenship if they're not the perfect citizens. And I think the same dynamic is happening with Superman. I think the reason why he's the perfect citizen is because he doesn't want anybody to question his citizenship, you know? And then I realized, you know, like, I think the reason why Superman and Batman are often paired together is because they offer a great contrast to each other. So Batman dresses up to be scary because he is not actually scary. He's actually this really good-looking playboy, you know, like a billionaire wasp. Like if you met him, you wouldn't be freaked out. You'd want to like try to get invited to the next party that he throws at his mansion. But Superman is a legitimately scary dude. He is he's an immigrant. He's like this foreigner with all these crazy powers. And I think he dresses up to not be scary. I think he dresses up for the exact opposite reason as Batman does. So, you know, once I wrapped my head around that, I became a Superman fan because I felt like he really reflects my experience and the experience of my parents.
Yeah, I see that. You were able to create an Asian superhero, an Asian Superman, in the new Superman comic from DC. Literally, quote, new Superman, not a new Superman.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that just for a minute and the importance of that to Asian Americans?
Yeah, so that wasn't my idea. That was not my idea. DC actually had to pitch that to me. You know, like they were about to do the Rebirth relaunch in 2016, and then I got a call from them, and they're like, "Hey, what do you think about this? What if we do a Chinese Superman?" And I was like, "That sounds so stupid. I do not want anything to do with that." Because they didn't want a Chinese American. They wanted like Chinese. They wanted a kid that was growing up in China to become Superman, right? And I'd never lived in China. I didn't know if I just didn't feel like I could do it right. And then I get called into the DC offices for a meeting. Jim Lee pulls me into his office. So I have like a box of Jim Lee comics from when I was in high school, you know? I used to line up at local comic book conventions to get his signature. I'm a huge Jim Lee fan. So he calls me into his office and he's like, this was my idea. So supposedly it was him and Jeff Johns that came up with it. And they wanted an Asian member of the Superman family. So Jim Lee says all this other stuff. I'm just I don't remember anything he said because I was just staring at his face. I was like, I can't believe I'm in Jimmy's office. And at the end of that meeting, I was like, all right, I guess we're doing this, you know? And it ended up being way more fun than I thought it was going to be. Part of the reason I was freaked out about it is it's tied into my family history. Like my mom's family left China just as the Communist Party was coming into power, you know? And part of the reason they had to leave was because my grandfather, her father, worked for the nationalist government, which was the government that was in power that collapsed right before the Communist Party came into power. So I grew up with really intense opinions about politics in China. And I know as an adult, you know, I know things are more nuanced now than they were back then. But even so, I was just like, dude, like Superman's supposed to be about truth, justice, in the American way. What does that even mean in modern China? I was worried about all these like political potholes that I might be able to fall into. But in the end, I felt like DC gave me enough elbow room that I was able to tell the story I wanted to tell, and it just was way more fun than I thought it was going to be. It was so fun. It was like they gave me a little corner of the DC universe, and they're like, just do what you want. So I was like, you know, can we have a Chinese Wonder Woman? And they're like, yes. And I said, can she be a snake woman? And they're like, yes. And then I was like, can we have a Chinese Batman? And they said, yes. And then I said, can he be, you know, kind of overweight and awesome? You know, because that's like a kung fu movie trope,
Sure.
right? Like there's this like chubby dude who comes on the screen, everybody makes fun of him, and then he just kicks everybody's butt. So that's what I want a Chinese Batman to be like. You know, he comes on the screen, everybody kind of dismisses him, and then he ends up being the best one out of all of them, like the best fighter out of all of them. So they totally let me do that. And then the last thing that they let me do was like, I said, can we do like an Aquaman on the team? And they're like, yes. And then I said, can he be North Korean? And they're like, yes. So it was awesome. They let me, like, I had so much creative elbow room on that. It was super fun.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's very cool. How about that question from Mia there? Yeah, that one. Why did you think Superman was a dork?
Okay, so first he had this like bright blue costume. Okay, he always like he had a 1950s haircut with a spit curl. He always did the right thing. So like Batman would hang somebody upside down over a rooftop. You could never imagine Superman doing something like that, right? You could never imagine Superman doing something like that. You can't even imagine Superman saying a bad word. Like, you can't even imagine Superman saying the word poop. You know what I mean? Like, he just seemed like such a dork. But I think the reason behind his dorkiness is what makes him compelling, right? There's like this deep need, like this deep want to fit in and to be a part of something, right? I think he's a fundamentally hopeful and good character, and I think he wants to express that hope and that goodness by being a part of a larger community. So and sometimes the way I interpret him is he struggles to fit in because he is really different, right? He's from a different culture. He has these different set of powers.
Yeah, no, I very much agree with all of that. Let's talk about the craft part of things for a minute. Obviously, you are a writer and artist, and we have a book like Dragon Hoops where you did it all by yourself. What's the difference between working on two kinds of books like this to you?
Yeah, well, first for Superman Smashes the Klan, I knew what I wanted it to look like, right? I wanted it to look like the Fleischer cartoons with a little bit of manga. Yeah. And I can't draw like that at all. Like, no matter how hard I tried, I would not be able to pull that off. So I'm so thankful that I got to work with Gurihiru. They really were the perfect art team for that story. For Dragon Hoops, this is actually about the team of the school where I used to teach. I was a high school teacher for 17 years. And because of that, because I know all of the people that are in the book, you know, I'm friends with the coach. We still text each other all the time. I felt like I needed control over the line work in order to tell that story properly. I guess that's kind of the dividing line. Like if it's a story where I just think I can't draw the way the story needs to be drawn, I'll try to work with somebody else. And then if there's something really personal about it that I feel like I need a lot more control, I'll draw it myself. I'm a really slow artist too, you know, so there's no way I just wouldn't be able to draw all the stories that I wanted to tell.
Yeah, I guess I'm
lucky. I'm lucky that people like Gurihiru, for sure.
Sure. No, I mean, I would agree with that 100%. I think my question was maybe more, do you approach the work differently? You know, just as an example off the top of my head, you probably, even though you might write a full script, you don't necessarily need to describe things to yourself that you're drawing. But when you're writing for someone else, you've got to really say what it is that you want and explain it in a way so that an artist can understand that. So does that change the art at any point? Does that change?
Yeah. So I guess one of the big differences is for something like Dragon Hoops, I actually write directly in thumbnails. I'll do a text outline of every chapter, and then I'll go straight from that to thumbnails. I won't do a script. But for Avatar: Last Airbender, for Superman, for all the books that I've done, all the monthly series that I've done for DC Comics, I'll do it in script format. And in that script format, I am pretty detailed. Like I'll send links and stuff for references. For Gurihiru though, I do pull back on that a little bit because I've worked with them on so many comics at this point. There's some things where I'm just like, they're gonna draw this right. I don't have to explain it perfectly. They're gonna draw this right.
Sure. Do you think that your visual training of being an artist yourself makes you a better writer? Maybe. I do think a lot of times I'll describe a panel in a certain way, and the artist will change it up. And I would say 99 times out of 100, the way they change it up is better than how I imagined it. I do think that I'm a relatively limited cartoonist. Like there are just certain angles that I can't draw. There's no way. Like a bird's eye view. I don't know if I can handle it right? Or like an extreme worm's eye view. I don't know if I can handle that right. So because of that, I wonder if I sometimes naturally in my scripts avoid things that I would not be able to draw as a cartoonist. So I don't know. I don't know if I have a definitive answer on that. There are other things though that I do think it helps to be an artist. Like I almost always include lighting information and like the time of year and that sort of thing. Anything that'll affect the colors on the page, sure,
I'll include. And I do know that sometimes writers will forget that.
Yeah. Do you thumbnail out your scripts before you send them out to the artist, just to, I don't know, make sure that you don't have characters crossing panels and crossing dialogue, and you know the kind of thing I'm talking about? I
do. I thumbnail. Yeah, so for all the projects that I've done for First Second books, even if it's with another artist, like I did a book called Shadow Hero with Sunny Liu, who's an amazing artist out of Singapore. I did a series called Secret Coders with Mike Holmes, who's now doing the Wings of Fire graphic novels. He's awesome. Yep. For all those books, I do thumbnails, so I actually send them thumbnails. But for the books that I've done for DC Comics and for Dark Horse, I've only done script. There are certain cases, I don't think I've ever done this for Gurihiru, but there are certain cases where I actually will thumbnail out a page just and include that as part of the script, just because there's something about it that's really hard to describe in text.
Yeah. Speaking of Secret Coders, Quirky, that one, just wanted to ask, are there any more Secret Coder books coming?
So right now there are no other Secret Coders books in the works. Thank you for asking, but I am working on a Secret Coders related project. We'll see if that actually sees the light of day. Hopefully it will.
That's very cool. Let me see. Just from a technical question, I'm wondering. This is my question. Why was the decision made to make the background of Superman's shield black rather than the traditional yellow.
Yeah, I wanted some way of visually indicating that it was in the 1940s. You know, so in the 1940s, in the comics, Superman has his traditional shield with the yellow background, but in those old Fleischer cartoons, he does have the black background. So the shield that Gurihiru came up with for him in the book is kind of an amalgamation of both. So color-wise, it very much is like the old Fleischer one, but in terms of the shape, it looks more like what he had in the comics.
Yeah, I love those old Fleischer cartoons. They're all public domain at this point, as far as I know. So any kids out there, if you're interested in more Superman, you know, there's modern cartoons which are fine, but go check out these old Fleischer cartoons from the 1940s because they are so beautiful. They use a technique, I believe this is correct. They use a technique called rotoscoping, where they actually filmed someone doing whatever they have Superman doing, and then they draw over it so that it looks really realistic, and they're just lush and beautiful and gorgeous, and yes, they're a little out of step with our times in a couple places. There's probably some more casual racism than there should be, but they're just good looking things. Oh my gosh, they're
gorgeous. They really are. They're works of art, and they totally informed that Bruce Timm series, right?
Yeah.
That came out in the 90s and I think the 2000s. Yeah, they totally informed that.
Yeah, no, they're great stories. And it's so interesting because the Fleischer brothers are the same ones who did Popeye, and you would never guess that it was the same people, you know, because they're just done in such manners. And what else? Is there anything you'd like to plug coming up? It's always good to let you plug stuff.
Well, right now, what I'm working on is a Shang-Chi limited series from Marvel. This will be the first. Like I did a tiny thing for Marvel years ago, but this is the first real substantial thing that I'm doing for them. It'll be 5 issues. Originally, the first issue was supposed to come out next month, I think, but because of everything that's going on, it's been delayed until September. So I'm excited about it. Shang-Chi is a character that I used to avoid when I was a kid because I was embarrassed.
Yeah.
But he is the most prominent Asian American superhero at this point. So to get to kind of work on him and tell a story with him has been great.
Yeah, is it tricky to work on a character like that who where you really can't remove the racism from the character in a way?
It's hard. Yeah, no joke. It is hard, right? Like his origin story is kind of crazy. He was originally the son of Fu Manchu, who is not a Marvel-owned character. Marvel doesn't have the license to Fu Manchu anymore. Right. So they had to. I think Ed Brubaker maybe tweaked it. I think it was him. I think he tweaked it. I think he gave him
I think that's right.
A tweaked backstory, right? But even then, I think it's just hard. I think it is really hard. That's one of the challenges. So Marvel is not like DC, where there are these really intense reboots, right? So we want to respect what came before, but maybe his dad, like Shang-Chi's dad, is still a supervillain, and he's still a supervillain that is rooted in dynastic China. But we're hoping that we can add more nuance to him. We'll see if that works. But that is one of the big challenges.
Yeah. If you had a dream book that you could do from Marvel, just because, and obviously it can't be Thing versus a ROM because they don't own ROM anymore.
Yeah. That's too bad, huh? They don't own ROM. For Marvel, I mean, I'd love to do like a middle grade or YA graphic novel for Marvel as well. That'd be great. Yeah, and maybe with Spider-Man would be fun.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah. They're slowly starting to move into that space, so So maybe it can happen. Yeah. Anything else you'd like to plug or say or anything?
Well, I hope people will check out the rest of the line as well. The rest of the DC Young Readers line. I just read Wonder Woman Tempest Tossed. It was awesome. And let's see, Green Lantern Legacy is a great book. I mean, there's so many. It's pretty much every single one that I've read so far from that line has been great. So if you have, like, if you're a long time comic book fan and you have kids in your house, you should get these books for your kids. That is the bridge between the comics that you read as a kid and the comics that they are reading.
Yeah, well, and I'll tell the audience, next month's book is actually Primer, the original superhero.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, a color-based superhero. I loved that comic. I thought it was a lot of fun. So, yeah, that's next month.
Yeah, I haven't read that one yet. I've heard great things though.
Oh, it's really good. I know, it's super swell, Gene. It's super swell. Very good. Well, I'm gonna call it there because we've been talking for an hour and a half, and I really want to thank you for your time. I certainly want to thank Gurihiru for coming in earlier, all the way from Japan. That was really above and beyond. If you're sitting there at home and you want a comic to read, I recommend Superman Smashes the Klan so strongly. It's fun. It's energetic. It's action packed. It has a message that relates and is of today, and I cannot imagine that not only your kids are going to love this book, but you're going to love this book too. And if you happen to buy it from us too, we have stickers that Gene signed, and we will include with every copy that you buy as well. So there's that too. Otherwise, we will see you next month. Gene, don't go. We're going to do something at the end here. But I want to thank Gene for being here. I want to thank Jordan for doing tech support. I want to thank The Beat for being our sponsor. And I want to thank all of the readers at home for reading comics and telling us what you like about comics and telling us what you don't and being part of these conversations. And if you haven't read it yet, Superman Smashes the Klan, great book. We'll see you next month.